A single set of flashing blue and red lights can shatter the night's silence. For most, it's a moment of anxiety, a speeding ticket, a forgotten signal. But for Officer Kade Rawlings, a man simmering with unseen resentments, this one stop was different. He was about to assert his authority on a quiet suburban street, targeting a man in a car that felt out of place. Kade believed he held all the power. He was wrong. In the space of a single breath, 5 brutal words would not only strip him of his authority, but would detonate his entire life. This isn't just a story about a traffic stop. It's about the collision of prejudice and professionalism and the devastating karma that follows when you try to break a man who holds your entire world in his hands. The night air in the affluent suburb of Oak Ridge Heights was cool and still smelling of freshly cut grass and money. For Officer Kade Rawlings, it smelled like hypocrisy. He cruised the wide, empty streets in his patrol car, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Each sprawling mansion with its perfectly manicured lawn and warm, glowing windows was a silent mockery of his own life. The cramped 2-bedroom apartment, the mountain of medical bills on the kitchen table, the gnawing, ever-present fear for his 7-year-old daughter, Lily. Kade was a good cop. At least he told himself that. He was tough, decisive, and he didn't take crap from anyone. But lately, a bitter resentment had taken root in his soul. He saw the world through a cracked lens of us versus them. Them, the people in these houses with their easy lives and expensive problems. Us, the guys in blue, cleaning up the messes holding the line and going home to real-world struggles they couldn't possibly comprehend. That's when he saw it. A sleek black Audi, the kind of car that cost more than his annual salary, gliding down a street where it didn't belong. It wasn't speeding or swerving. In fact, it was driving cautiously, respectfully. But to Kade, it was a nail sticking up, and he was the hammer. He didn't recognize the car. It wasn't one of the local fixtures. In his gut, a place he trusted more than any manual, it felt wrong. He flipped on the lights. The brilliant strobes of red and blue slashed across the pristine lawns and brick facades, an alien intrusion in this peaceful world. The Audi pulled over immediately, its engine humming a low, powerful tune. Kade took his time. He let the driver sit there, bathed in the flashing lights, feeling the heat. It was a small assertion of dominance, a reminder of who was in charge. He radioed in the stop, his voice clipped and professional. "Got a black Audi license plate. Echo Delta 79er Charlie Victor. Running it now. West Elm Street." His partner for the night, Officer Peterson, a younger, more easygoing cop, glanced over. "What's the stop, Kade? I didn't see an infraction." "Suspicious vehicle, Peterson. Doesn't fit the neighborhood." Kade grunted, already opening his door. "You learn to feel these things." Peterson sighed quietly, but knew better than to argue when Kade was in this kind of mood. Kade approached the driver's side window, his hand resting on his service weapon, his face set in a stony mask of authority. The window slid down silently, revealing the driver. He was a black man, maybe in his early 40s, with a calm, intelligent face. He wore simple, well-fitting scrubs, the kind doctors or nurses wore. His hands were resting on the steering wheel at the 10-2 position, perfectly visible. "Good evening, officer," the man said, his voice even and unbothered. "License and registration," Kade demanded, skipping the pleasantries. His flashlight beam cut across the man's face, making him squint slightly, but he didn't complain. The man reached slowly for his glove compartment and produced a leather wallet and the vehicle's registration from a neat folder. He handed them over. Kade snatched them. He shone his light on the driver's license. The name read Dr. Elias Cole. Address 1514, Northwood Drive, a few blocks over, in an even wealthier section of Oak Ridge. Kade felt a flash of irritation. So he did live here. It didn't change anything. Dr. Elias Cole, Kade said, drawing out the name with a sneer. A doctor, huh? You look a little young to be a doctor living out here. What kind of doctor are you? The man Dr. Cole simply met his gaze. Is there a problem? Officer, was I breaking a law? The polite defiance stoked Kade's anger. This guy wasn't scared. He wasn't intimidated. He was acting like he had every right to be here, which technically he did. That was the most infuriating part. I'll ask the questions, Kade snapped. What are you doing out this late, coming from a late-night party? He was fishing, baiting him, hoping for a reaction, an excuse to escalate. I was at the hospital. I'm on my way home, Dr. Cole replied, his composure unshakable. The hospital? Kade scoffed. He was building a narrative in his head. A drug deal, maybe. Something illicit. These rich guys were all the same. You got a long shift, Doc. You look tired. You've been drinking tonight. No, officer, I have not been drinking. Dr. Cole said, a flicker of weariness finally showing in his eyes, but not an ounce of fear. I have a very important day tomorrow. I need to get home and get some rest. This was the moment Kade lived for, the moment to put people in their place. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a low, menacing growl. He was going to make this man understand the real pecking order. He was going to make him sweat. I don't really care about your important day, Kade said, savoring the intimidation. Right now, your whole world is me, this flashlight, and this ticket I'm about to write you for. Let's see. A suspicious lack of a front plate frame. You people with your fancy cars think the rules don't apply. But they do. My rules. He was enjoying himself, the feeling of control washing away the anxieties about Lily, about the bills, about his own stalled career. He was powerful again. Dr. Cole was silent for a long moment. He looked at Kade, not with anger, but with a sudden profound clarity, as if he were looking through him, right into the broken, fearful mess inside. His calm demeanor shifted into something else, not aggression, but a heavy, chilling gravity. He seemed to be connecting dots Kade couldn't see. Officer, Dr. Cole said, his voice now devoid of any warmth. You don't want to do this. Kade laughed, a short, sharp bark. Oh, I think I do. What's the matter, Doc? Worried you'll be late for your golf game? He was moments from telling him to step out of the vehicle. Dr. Cole looked at the name on Kade's badge. Rawlings. A flicker of recognition of terrible cosmic irony crossed his face. He let out a slow, tired breath. He looked Kade square in the eye, and the world seemed to stop. He then delivered the 5 words that would change everything, 5 words that were not a plea, but a statement of devastating fact. The one saving your daughter. The 5 words hung in the air, thick and heavy like smoke. They didn't register at first. To Kade it was just nonsensical defiance, a desperate, bizarre attempt by a cornered man to say something, anything, to get out of a jam. Kade's mind, clouded with prejudice and power, tried to process it as a threat. What did you just say to me? He growled, his hand instinctively tightening on his holstered weapon. But Dr. Cole didn't flinch. His gaze was unwavering, and it was filled with something Kade had not expected pity. "Your daughter." Dr. Cole repeated his voice, quiet but sharp as a scalpel. "Lily Rawlings, age 7, admitted for a complex pediatric neuroblastoma. The surgery is scheduled for tomorrow at 0800 hours. Her life is in my hands." Every word was a hammer blow against the fragile shell of Kade's bravado. "Lily." He said her name. Lily. How could this man know her name, neuroblastoma? The word that had haunted Kade and his wife Brenda's every waking moment for 6 agonizing months. The surgery tomorrow. Their last terrifying hope. The world tilted on its axis. The flashing red and blue lights seemed to pulse with Kade's own frantic heartbeat. The condescending smirk on his face dissolved, replaced by a slack-jawed mask of disbelief. The flashlight in his hand trembled. "You're lying," Kade whispered, but the words had no conviction. They were a flimsy shield against a horrifying truth. "Check the ID in your hand, Officer Rawlings," Dr. Cole said calmly. "Elias Cole, Chief of Pediatric Neurosurgery at St. Jude's General. There is only one person in this state qualified to perform this specific procedure. That person is me." Kade's eyes darted down to the plastic card in his hand. Dr. Elias Cole. The name. Brenda had said it 100 times over the past few weeks, always with a tone of reverence and desperation. "Dr. Cole is the best," she'd said. "He's our only chance, Kade. He's a miracle worker." This was him, the miracle worker. The man Kade and Brenda had placed all their faith in, the man they prayed for every night. And Kade had him pulled over on a dark road, treating him like a criminal, dripping contempt and racial bias. All while this man was on his way home to rest before holding his daughter's life in his hands. A wave of nausea washed over Kade. The air was sucked from his lungs. The power he had felt just moments before evaporated, leaving him feeling small, naked, and monstrous. His partner Peterson had been watching the exchange from the patrol car, growing increasingly uneasy. Seeing Kade freeze, he got out and walked over. "Kade, everything all right?" Kade couldn't speak. He just stood there, the driver's license shaking in his grip. Peterson peered into the car, his eyes falling on Dr. Cole. Then he looked at the ID in Kade's hand. Unlike Kade, Peterson had paid attention during the pre-op briefings his captain had allowed Kade to attend. He'd seen the picture of the surgical team. His eyes widened in horrified recognition. "Oh my God," Peterson breathed, looking from the ID to the doctor and back to his partner. "Kade, that's him. That's the doctor." The confirmation sent a final, devastating shockwave through Kade. It was real. This whole nightmare was real. He had just threatened, belittled, and racially profiled the one man on Earth who could save his little girl. He looked at Dr. Cole, truly looked at him for the first time. He saw the profound exhaustion in the man's eyes, the weight of responsibility he carried. He saw the patience that had been stretched to its limit, and he saw the profound, quiet disappointment. I didn't. Kade stammered, his mind a chaotic whirl of shame and terror. "I didn't know." "No." Dr. Cole said, his voice flat and emotionless. It was worse than anger. It was the detached voice of a professional who had been profoundly insulted, but had to move past it. "You didn't. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a 7-hour surgery to prepare for. I need to get some sleep. For Lily's sake." He didn't ask for his license back. He didn't need to. Kade felt the plastic card burn in his palm as if it were red hot. He numbly handed the license and registration back through the window. His hands were clumsy, fumbling. "Go," Kade croaked, his voice barely a whisper. "Please." The window slid up silently. The black Audi pulled away from the curb, its taillights disappearing into the affluent darkness, leaving Officer Kade Rawlings standing on the side of the road, utterly broken, bathed in the flashing, accusatory lights of his own patrol car. Peterson put a hand on his shoulder. "Kade." Kade shrugged it off. He stumbled back to his vehicle, the weight of what he had done crashing down on him. He had been a monster. He had let the poison inside him, his bitterness and prejudice, nearly sabotage the most important thing in his life. He had stared into the face of his family's savior and seen only a target for his rage. He collapsed into the driver's seat and buried his face in his hands. The image of Dr. Cole's calm, disappointed face burned into his mind. The regret was instantaneous, but it was more than regret. It was a chasm of self-loathing that had just opened up beneath him, and he was falling. The drive back to the precinct was a silent, agonizing ordeal. The rhythmic squeak of the windshield wipers seemed to mock Kade, counting down the seconds to a future he had just jeopardized. Peterson tried to speak once or twice, murmuring things like, "He'll understand, man," and "it was a mistake," but the words were hollow. They both knew it wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice. Kade had chosen to be cruel, and the universe had chosen the worst possible victim. Kade didn't do the end-of-shift paperwork. He couldn't focus. The words on the screen blurred into an indictment of his character. He dropped his keys on the sergeant's desk with a clatter and walked out into the pre-dawn chill. Without a word, feeling the eyes of the other officers on his back. News, especially bad news, traveled fast in a precinct. The door to his apartment opened with a familiar creak. Brenda was asleep on the couch, still in her clothes, the television murmuring a late-night infomercial. A half-empty mug of tea sat on the end table next to a worn-out copy of a parenting magazine. She had clearly waited up for him, and exhaustion had finally won. Seeing her there so vulnerable and worried sent a fresh spear of guilt through Kade's heart. She was the strong one. She was the one who managed the appointments, who deciphered the medical jargon, who held Lily's hand during the painful tests. She was the one who had clung to the name Dr. Cole like a holy mantra. He gently touched her shoulder. "Brenda, I'm home." She startled awake, her eyes wide with sleep and anxiety. "Kade, what time is it? Is everything okay?" Then she saw his face, the color drained from hers. In their 12 years together, she had seen him angry, tired, frustrated. She had never seen him look so utterly broken. "Kade, what is it?" she asked, sitting up straight. "Is it Lily?" "Did the hospital call?" No, Lily's. She's the same," he stammered, his voice thick with emotion. He couldn't meet her eyes. He sank into the armchair opposite the couch, the springs groaning under his weight. "Then what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." He took a deep breath, the confession clawing its way up his throat. "I did something, Bren. Something terrible." He told her everything. He started with the simmering anger he'd felt all shift the bitterness toward the rich neighborhood. He described the black Audi, the decision to make the stop without cause. He forced himself to recount the sneering questions, the accusations, the way he'd mocked the man's profession. His voice cracked as he repeated his own ugly words. And then he told her the man's name. Brenda listened, her expression shifting from confusion to dawning horror. When he said the name, "Doctor Elias Cole. She let out a small, strangled gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. "No," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "Kade, no. Tell me you didn't." "I did," he said, his own eyes burning. "I did all of it. I had him on the side of the road, Bren. I treated him like dirt. I was horrible to him. And he's the one. He's the one who's supposed to save her tomorrow." The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the sound of Brenda's ragged breathing. She stared at him not with anger, but with a profound, shattering disappointment that was 1,000 times worse. He had not just made a professional blunder. He had potentially offended the one man who held their daughter's fragile life in his skilled hands. He had let his own personal demons threaten their family in the most direct way imaginable. "What were you thinking?" She finally whispered the words, trembling. "All your anger, all your complaining about the world being unfair. I knew it was eating at you, Kade. But this, to take it out on him. I don't know." He choked out, the shame finally breaking him. He buried his face in his hands. "I'm so sorry, Brenda. I'm so sorry." Brenda stood up and began pacing the small living room, her arms wrapped around herself as if to hold herself together. What if he's angry? What if he's distracted? Surgeons are human. Kade, they need to be focused. Their hands need to be steady. And you filled his head with this ugliness hours before. He's supposed to open up our little girl's head. The thought was a physical blow. Kade felt it in his gut. What if Dr. Cole, despite his professionalism, carried that encounter into the operating room? A moment of distraction, a flicker of remembered anger. It could mean the difference between life and death. Kade hadn't just insulted a man. He had potentially shaken the hand of God's chosen instrument. He felt a primal fear, cold and sharp. He had placed his own family on a sacrificial altar to his own pathetic ego. "We have to call him," Brenda said, her voice frantic. "We have to apologize. We have to beg him to forgive you." "No," Kade said, looking up, his face ashen. "He said he needed to sleep, for Lily's sake. Calling him would only make it worse. It would be all about me again. It has to be about Lily now." They spent the rest of the pre-dawn hours in a state of suspended agony. Sleep was impossible. They sat in the dim light of their living room, the weight of Kade's actions pressing down on them, suffocating them. Kade kept replaying the scene over and over in his mind, the calm, dignified face of Dr. Cole, the condescending sneer on his own, the 5 words that had detonated his world. With every tick of the clock, the surgery grew closer. Kade Rawlings, a man who had always prided himself on being in control, had never felt so powerless. He had committed an unforgivable sin against the one person he needed a miracle from. And now all he could do was wait and pray that his personal failure wouldn't cost his daughter her life. The night was the longest of his life, a dark crucible of regret, and he knew with chilling certainty that morning would bring a judgment he could not escape. The sterile antiseptic smell of St. Jude's General Hospital was usually a source of anxiety for Kade. Today, it was the smell of ear judgment. He and Brenda walked through the automatic doors into the surgical wing's waiting area as if they were walking to a gallows. They hadn't spoken much since Kade's confession, their shared terror a thick wall between them. Lily had been admitted the night before. They had kissed her goodnight, her small body, looking lost in the large hospital bed, her favorite worn-out teddy bear clutched in her hand. Her bravery shamed him. She was facing the fight of her life with more courage than he had shown during a simple traffic stop. The waiting room was sparsely populated. A few other families sat in tense silence, their faces etched with the same fear Kade felt. He and Brenda found 2 chairs in a corner and sat their hands clenched in their laps. Every time a door opened, Kade's heart leaped into his throat. He was dreading it, but he knew he had to face him. Then the moment arrived. A set of double doors swung open, and Dr. Elias Cole walked through, looking just as he had the night before, dressed in fresh blue scrubs, his face calm and focused. He was holding a tablet, reviewing notes. For a moment, he didn't see them. He was in his element, a figure of serene competence in a world of fear and chaos. Brenda gasped softly and grabbed Kade's arm. Dr. Cole looked up his eyes, scanning the room. They landed on Kade and Brenda. There was no flash of anger, no sign of recognition of the previous night's drama. His expression was professionally neutral, almost distant. It was infinitely more terrifying than rage. He walked over to them. Kade's body went rigid. He forced himself to stand, pulling Brenda up with him. This was it. "Mr. and Mrs. Rawlings," Dr. Cole said, his voice even. "I was just reviewing Lily's latest scans. Everything is proceeding as planned. We're scheduled to begin in 30 minutes. Brenda burst into tears, a mixture of fear and the unbearable tension of the situation. "Dr. Cole," she began. Her voice choked with sobs. "We are so sorry. My husband, he's—" Kade cut her off gently. This was his shame to bear. He looked Dr. Cole directly in the eye the first time he had done so, without the corrupting filter of his own prejudice. "Doctor," Kade said, his voice raw and unsteady. "There are no words. What I did last night, the way I treated you, it was inexcusable. It was unprofessional, and it was wrong. I have no excuse. I was a lesser man, and I am asking you not as a police officer, but as a father to please. Don't let my ignorance, my stupidity affect my daughter. Please." The apology hung in the sterile air. It was a complete and utter surrender. Kade Rawlings, the tough cop, was stripped of all pretense, begging for mercy from the man he had wronged. Dr. Cole listened, his expression unreadable. He looked from Kade's desperate face to Brenda's tear-streaked one. He let the silence stretch for a long moment, allowing the weight of Kade's confession to settle. Then he finally spoke, and his words were not of forgiveness nor of anger. They were the words of a consummate professional. "Officer Rawlings," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "The man I met on the side of the road last night is of no concern to me today. My only concern is a 7-year-old girl named Lily. In that operating room, nothing else in the world exists. Not you, not me, not what happened between us. There is only my patient. I have made a promise to her and to you to give her my absolute best. That is a promise I intend to keep. Now a nurse will be out shortly to take you to the pre-op consultation room." He gave them a single formal nod, turned and walked back through the double doors, leaving them standing in the waiting room. Kade felt a strange mix of profound relief and deeper shame. Dr. Cole hadn't absolved him. He hadn't said it's okay. He had simply dismissed him. He had made it clear that Kade's pathetic drama was an irrelevant distraction from the life-or-death matter at hand. The quiet, professional dismissal was a more potent judgment than any tirade could have been. Kade Rawlings, the man, was insignificant. Only Lily, the patient, mattered. The next 7 hours were a blur of hellish waiting. They sat in a small, private room, staring at a clock on the wall where every tick felt like an hour. They drank bitter coffee they didn't taste and flipped through magazines they didn't read. Kade prayed. He hadn't prayed sincerely in years, but now he prayed with the desperation of a drowning man praying for Lily's life, for the steadiness of Dr. Cole's hands, and for a chance to somehow become a man worthy of the miracle he was asking for. Finally, after an eternity, the doors opened again. Dr. Cole stood there, his mask down his face, slick with sweat and etched with exhaustion. But his eyes were clear. Kade and Brenda shot to their feet, their hearts seizing. The tumor was fully encapsulated. Dr. Cole said, his voice tired but steady. The resection was successful. We got it all. She's in recovery. She's going to be okay. Brenda collapsed into Kade's arms, sobbing with unrestrained relief. Kade held her tears streaming down his own face, looking over her shoulder at the surgeon. He mouthed the words, "Thank you," but they felt impossibly small, laughably inadequate. Dr. Elias Cole, their savior, simply nodded once more, a gesture of profound, weary duty fulfilled. He had done his job. He had saved Lily's life, not because of Kade, but in spite of him. And as Kade held his weeping wife, a new cold dread began to form in his stomach. The immediate crisis was over, but he knew the reckoning for his actions was just beginning. The relief that flooded the Rawlings world was euphoric. Lily's recovery was slow but steady, each small milestone, a flicker of her eyelids, a squeeze of her hand. Her first sleepy words was a miracle. Kade and Brenda were a constant presence at her bedside. Their world shrunk to the four walls of the hospital room. In this small bubble of hope, Kade almost allowed himself to believe the nightmare was over. He was wrong. What Kade hadn't considered was the other man in the patrol car that night. Officer Peterson was a good cop, but he was also a man of unshakable principle. The incident had unsettled him deeply, not just because of the incredible coincidence, but because of what it revealed about his senior partner. He had seen Kade's simmering anger boil over into naked, baseless aggression. He had heard the ugly, prejudiced tone. And he knew that if the driver of that Audi hadn't been Dr. Elias Cole, the encounter could have ended very differently, with a false arrest, a violent confrontation, or worse. For a week, Peterson wrestled with his conscience. The blue wall of silence was a powerful creed, but his duty to the badge, to the idea of what a police officer should be, was stronger. With a heavy heart, he typed up a formal statement detailing the events of the traffic stop and submitted it to his precinct captain. He hadn't done it out of malice toward Kade. He did it because the entire stop was recorded on Kade's body camera, and Peterson knew that footage was a ticking time bomb. The captain, a veteran named Davies, who had seen it all, read Peterson's report with a sinking feeling. He immediately pulled the bodycam footage from the archive. The video was even worse than the report described. The camera pinned to Kade's chest captured everything in stark, undeniable detail. It recorded the sleek black of the Audi against the manicured lawns. It recorded the calm, patient voice of Dr. Cole. And it recorded Kade's voice, dripping with contempt, loaded with insinuation and utterly damning. The audio was crystal clear. "A doctor, huh? You look a little young to be a doctor living out here. What are you doing out this late, coming from a late-night party? I don't really care about your important day. Right now, your whole world is me." Captain Davies watched the whole thing, his face growing grimmer with each passing second. He saw Kade's sneer, his aggressive posture. Then he saw the moment of shattering realization after Dr. Cole's 5 words. He saw his officer, a man he'd known for a decade, completely unravel. This wasn't a simple mistake. It was a gross abuse of authority, a clear case of racial profiling, and a public relations disaster of catastrophic proportions waiting to happen. His hands were tied. He had no choice but to forward the report and the footage to Internal Affairs. The first karma had struck. It wasn't loud or explosive. It came in the form of a quiet official summons. 2 weeks after Lily's surgery, while she was finally back home and learning to walk again, Kade was called into a sterile, windowless room at headquarters. Across the table sat Lieutenant Miller, a woman from IA, known for her sharp intellect and zero-tolerance policy for misconduct. She had a file open in front of her. Kade's file. Officer Rawlings. Miller began, her voice devoid of emotion. We are here to discuss a traffic stop you conducted on the evening of May 17th. The subject was Dr. Elias Cole. We have a statement from Officer Peterson and a full recording from your body-worn camera. Kade's blood ran cold. The body cam. In his panic and shame, he had completely forgotten about the unblinking electronic eye on his chest. I have reviewed the footage, Miller continued, her eyes locking onto his. And frankly, I'm appalled. Your conduct was unprofessional, your basis for the stop was non-existent, and your line of questioning was a textbook example of biased policing. Can you explain your actions? Officer. Kade opened his mouth, but no sound came out. What could he say? That he was having a bad day, that he was worried about his daughter. Those were reasons, not excuses. He knew from Miller's cold demeanor that she had heard every excuse in the book, and she wasn't buying any of them. I made a mistake, Lieutenant, he finally managed to say. A mistake is forgetting to file a report on time, Rawlings. Miller countered, her voice like ice. What I saw on that video was a conscious choice to harass a citizen based on the color of his skin and the car he was driving. You are officially suspended without pay, pending the outcome of this investigation. Suspended. The word hit him like a physical blow. Without pay. The medical bills, already a mountain, now seemed like an insurmountable Everest. The only reason, Miller added, leaning forward slightly, that you are not already fired is the extraordinary context surrounding the incident. The department is aware of your daughter's situation and Dr. Cole's involvement, which brings me to my next point. She slid a form across the table. Dr. Cole will be called to give a statement. This is now a formal investigation. And let me be perfectly clear, Kade. The personal connection you have to him will not save you. In fact, it might just make this whole thing worse. Kade walked out of that room, a ghost. His badge and service weapon had been confiscated. He was no longer a cop. He was just a man in civilian clothes, stripped of his identity and his income. He had thought that Dr. Cole's quiet professionalism in the hospital was the end of it. He had been naive. The real consequences, the cold, bureaucratic karma of the system he had sworn to uphold, were just beginning to unfold. And the key witness to his disgrace was the very man who had saved his daughter's life. The Internal Affairs investigation proceeded with grim efficiency. Lieutenant Miller was as thorough as she was unforgiving. She didn't just focus on the single incident with Dr. Cole. She used it as a key to unlock a door Kade had kept firmly shut. She pulled his entire jacket, every commendation, and more importantly, every complaint. A pattern began to emerge. It wasn't glaring, not a series of high-profile lawsuits, but a subtle, ugly thread. 3 informal complaints over 5 years, all from minority drivers pulled over in affluent neighborhoods. All were dismissed due to lack of evidence or the driver's unwillingness to pursue a formal process against a police officer. But now, in the context of the body cam footage, these old complaints took on a new, damning light. Kade wasn't just a good cop who had one bad night. He was a cop who harbored a prejudice, and on May 17th, he had finally been caught. The summons for Dr. Elias Cole to give a statement was unavoidable. He arrived at the IA office not in scrubs, but in a simple professional suit. He was reluctant, his demeanor making it clear he took no pleasure in this. He had a child's life to save that afternoon. He had no time for this drama. Miller was direct. "Dr. Cole, we have footage of the incident. We just need your perspective. Did you feel you were stopped because of your race?" Elias Cole was quiet for a moment, choosing his words with the same precision he used in surgery. "I was driving the speed limit in a neighborhood where I have resided for 8 years. I was not in violation of any traffic laws. The officer's questions were not about a moving violation. They were about who I was and why I was there. You can draw your own conclusions from that." He was factual. He didn't editorialize. He didn't demand Kade's badge. He simply stated the facts as they occurred. But the cold, hard facts were more than enough. His testimony, combined with the video and the pattern of prior complaints, sealed Kade's fate with the department. The recommendation from IA was termination. But karma is rarely a private affair. The story was too compelling, too ironic, to stay contained within the walls of the police department. Someone, a clerk in the IA office, a cop in the precinct who heard the gossip, leaked it. The tip landed on the desk of Penelope Graves, a sharp, ambitious investigative reporter for the city's largest news channel. Penelope was tenacious. She started digging. She filed Freedom of Information Act requests. She spoke to off-the-record sources. She uncovered the prior complaints. She confirmed Lily Rawlings' surgery and Dr. Cole's role as her surgeon. The pieces locked together into a story of shocking, dramatic power. The first broadcast aired on the 6 o'clock news. A story of prejudice power and unbelievable irony tonight. Penelope Graves began, her serious face filling the screen. "We have uncovered an investigation into a local police officer, Kade Rawlings, who is accused of racially profiling a prominent surgeon." The twist. That same surgeon was scheduled the very next day to perform a life-saving operation on the officer's own 7-year-old daughter. The report was explosive. They couldn't air the body cam footage, but Penelope's description of it was vivid. They showed a picture of Kade in his uniform, looking stern and authoritative. They showed a file photo of Dr. Cole accepting a medical award, looking distinguished and brilliant. They blurred out a picture of Lily, but described her brave battle with cancer. The narrative was irresistible, the bigoted cop saved by the very man he had victimized. The public reaction was immediate and overwhelming. The story went viral. It was picked up by national news outlets, blog sites, and morning talk shows. The court of public opinion delivered its verdict far faster than the police department. Kade Rawlings became a household name, a symbol of everything wrong with modern policing. He was vilified, turned into a caricature of a racist cop. The hard karma had hit, and it was brutal. Kade and Brenda couldn't leave their apartment without facing whispers and stares. Their phone rang with hateful calls from strangers. Reporters camped outside their building. Kade was officially fired from the police force, his career of 15 years erased in a public firestorm. The financial ruin was swift. With no income and the suspension back pay denied, they defaulted on loans. The medical bills, which insurance only partially covered, were a crushing weight. They had to move out of their apartment, forced into a smaller, run-down place in a part of town had used to patrol with disdain. He tried to find other work, But his name was now toxic. No security firm would hire him. A simple background check brought up dozens of news articles, painting him as a monster. He ended up taking a grueling under-the-table job with a moving company hauling the furniture of wealthy families, a bitter echo of the life he once resented. He had lost his job, his reputation, and his pride. Every day was a struggle for survival, and every night when he looked at his daughter, his beautiful, healthy Lily, he was reminded of the two defining facts of his life: the incredible grace he had been shown by Dr. Cole in the operating room, and the devastating, life-shattering karma he had earned on the side of that dark, quiet road. He was a man, saved and damned in the same breath. 5 years is a long time. Long enough for a scandal to fade from the headlines, for a city to move on to new outrages. But for Kade Rawlings, the past 5 years had been a relentless daily penance. Life was a humbling grind. He had moved from the moving company to a job as a night shift janitor at a downtown office building. The work was anonymous, solitary. It gave him too much time to think. He mopped gleaming marble floors in lobbies where men in expensive suits made deals a ghost haunting a world he could no longer access. The anger he once felt toward such men was gone, replaced by a hollow ache of understanding. He had been a fool. His prejudice was born of insecurity, a sickness of the soul he hadn't even recognized until it had cost him everything. Brenda had stayed with him. Their marriage was strained, but had somehow survived, forged anew in the fires of shared hardship. She worked as a cashier. Her hands chapped her face, perpetually tired, but her love for Kade and Lily was an anchor in the storm. And Lily, she was 12 now, vibrant and healthy. She was a straight-A student, a talented artist, a whirlwind of youthful energy. The scar on the back of her head, hidden by her hair, was the only physical trace of her ordeal. She was Kade's reason for getting up every morning, and his constant living reminder of his deepest shame and his greatest debt. He knew the name of the man who had given him this precious gift, but he had not seen or heard from Dr. Elias Cole since that day in the hospital. The surgeon had moved on, continuing to save lives while Kade was left to scrub floors. It felt to Kade like justice. The final unexpected chapter of his karma arrived on a cold, rainy Tuesday. The company that managed the office building where Kade worked was hosting a large charity fundraiser for the pediatric wing of St. Jude's General. The event was for the city's elite, a gala of tuxedos and gowns. Kade's job was to keep the bathrooms clean and the hallways free of spills. He was emptying a trash can near the main ballroom when he heard a familiar voice. It was calm, articulate, and carried the same quiet authority he remembered with a gut-wrenching clarity. He peered around the corner. There, speaking to a small, adoring group, was Dr. Elias Cole. He looked older, with flecks of grey at his temples, but he radiated the same powerful competence. He was the keynote speaker, the guest of honor. Kade's heart hammered against his ribs. He wanted to flee to become invisible, but his feet were rooted to the spot. He saw Dr. Cole excuse himself from the group to get a glass of water. He was walking directly toward Kade's position. There was no escape. Dr. Cole approached his eyes momentarily, glancing at the janitor in the grey uniform. For a split second, there was no recognition. Kade was just part of the background. Then Dr. Cole paused. His eyes narrowed slightly. He looked at Kade. Truly looked at him, and a flicker of memory crossed his face. "Rawlings," he said, his voice a quiet question. Kade's throat went dry. All the shame, all the regret of the past 5 years washed over him. He wasn't a cop anymore. He had no power, no badge, no pride. He was just a janitor. A broken man. "Yes, sir. Dr. Cole," Kade said, his voice barely a whisper. He couldn't meet the surgeon's eyes, staring instead at the polished floor he had just mopped. An awkward silence stretched between them, a universe of unspoken history. Kade started, forcing himself to look up. The apology he had given in the hospital was born of fear. This one had to be different. "I never had the chance to thank you properly. Not just for what you did for my little girl, but for everything. You gave my daughter back to me. And I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for the man I was that night. I'm sorry you ever had to meet him." It was a simple, unadorned confession. There was nothing for him to gain. It was the pure, unvarnished truth of a man who had hit rock bottom and was finally looking up. Dr. Cole studied him for a long moment. He saw the worn-out uniform, the tired lines on Kade's face, the profound humility in his eyes. The last time he had seen this man, he was full of misplaced rage. Now he was empty of it. Finally, Dr. Cole spoke, and his voice was not cold or professional. It was simply human. "I read about what happened to you, Mr. Rawlings. I never wanted that for you. I took no pleasure in it." "You didn't do it, sir," Kade said quickly. "I did it to myself. I earned it." Dr. Cole nodded slowly. "Sometimes the hardest lessons are the most necessary. How is she, Lily?" The question, the simple act of remembering her name, broke through the last of Kade's defenses. A tear escaped his eye. "She's amazing," he said, a genuine, proud smile gracing his lips for the first time in years. "She's 12. She loves to draw. She's perfect." A rare, small smile touched Dr. Cole's lips. "Good. That's good to hear. That is all that ever mattered." He looked at Kade, at the man he was now. "It takes a strong man to face himself, Mr. Rawlings. I hope you've found some peace." He extended his hand. Kade stared at it for a second, disbelieving. The hand that had saved his daughter's life. Hesitantly, he reached out his own calloused, work-worn hand and shook it. It wasn't a handshake of forgiveness, not exactly. It was a handshake of closure, an acknowledgement of a shared, terrible history, and the possibility of a different future. Dr. Cole departed, leaving Kade standing in the hallway. The encounter hadn't magically fixed his life. He was still a janitor. The bills were still there. But something inside him had shifted. The crushing weight of his shame had eased, replaced by a fragile sense of peace. His karma hadn't been just about punishment. It had been a painful, brutal, and necessary purification. He had lost everything he thought he valued, only to find the one thing that truly mattered a chance to be a better man for the daughter he was so blessed to still have. And in the quiet humility of his new life, he finally began to pay a different kind of debt, not of money or status, but of gratitude and a hard-won understanding of grace. The story of Kade Rawlings and Dr. Elias Cole is a stark reminder of how quickly a life can change. It's a story about how the poison of prejudice born from personal pain and insecurity can lead us to commit acts we will forever regret. Kade's journey through public shame, financial ruin, and personal humiliation was the direct result of a single terrible choice. But it's also a story about profound grace and the long, difficult road to redemption. Dr. Cole's unwavering professionalism in the face of ugliness saved a life, while his quiet humanity years later perhaps helped save a soul. It makes us ask ourselves, what biases do we carry? And what would we do if we came face to face with the consequences of our worst moments? If this story moved you and gave you something to think about, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share this video with someone who appreciates powerful real-life drama. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story that explores the moments that change us forever. Thank you for listening.